What I've come to realize is the reason scientists en masse are not obsessed with UFOs and scammering to study this phenomenon is the same reason that our governments lied to us about the existence of UFOs. Dr. Eric Davis, who was a consultant for ATIP and may still be a consultant for that operation, told the basement office that the reason the US government keeps UAP completely secret is because it's so beyond human comprehension that they don't know how to deal with it on a legislative basis, they don't know how to deal with it on a military operational basis, and they don't know how to deal with it on a presidential policy basis. And so what they do in this complex situation is they allow a finite number of scientists, engineers, and investigators to try to figure it out, and they fund them, and sometimes they don't fund them. And when that happens, all of the information pertaining to UAP just sits in a classified storage warehouse and collects cobwebs. To me, the reason scientists basically ignore the UFO subject, and there are exceptions, but the reason the vast majority of scientists ultimately in the final analysis ignore the UFO subject is because they perceive that there's not enough evidence justifying putting time, energy, and funds into researching UFOs. They look at it this way. We have video cameras all over the place. We have satellites all over the place. We have amateur and professional astronomers all over the place, 24 hours a day around the globe, looking up into the heavens, and yet we still have no smoking gun of unknown, unaccounted for, extremely advanced machines zipping around in our airspace. It stands to reason, according to them, that if this phenomenon was real, then the evidence would support the reality of it being real, but the evidence does not. And they don't find witness testimony very compelling. In fact, within the scientific community, at least according to Neil deGrasse Tyson, witness testimony is the least impressive, the worst kind of evidence that you could possibly have. Apparently, they don't find government documents in which insiders have spoken soberly about UFOs and them existing and not being fictitious and not being of this world. They don't find that impressive either. They also don't find Navy aviators and radar operators and their testimony very compelling either, because again, even though that testimony is expert testimony and is coming from professionals using scientific tools and coming from people who are tasked with flying $70 million war machines and winning wars on behalf of the United States government and so forth, doesn't matter. It's still, at the end of the day, witness testimony. So it doesn't matter to them. Elon Musk, when he was on the Joe Rogan show, made a very compelling point, and one that I think is a great argument, even though I am, without question, a believer in UFO reality. I'm not convinced, but I believe. Two very different things, and I've covered this many times, so let's not get that twisted. But he stated that if UFOs were real and of non-human origin, and let's say aliens from other planets have visited our planet before, or have visited other planets in our solar system before, then why are there no relics? None that we can verify stems from non-human intelligence. I think that's an extremely compelling argument. Because if human beings were to go to Mars, for example, and spend any amount of time there, there is no question that we would have relics all over the place. Trash, infrastructure, rovers that have broke down miles and miles away that we just didn't bother recovering, garbage, food storage units. I mean, the list is endless. Endless. So we look at our ways of existing, and we extrapolate from that. If we visit other planets, we leave tons of stuff behind. So how on God's green earth have UFOs been potentially part of this biosphere or visiting this biosphere for decades and decades and maybe even thousands of years, and maybe they've visited other planets too, but yet there is nothing verifiable that's stemming from non-human intelligence. Nothing, not one thing that we can verify that would fall under the category of a smoking gun. Great argument. Can't argue with Elon Musk there. That is a fantastic argument. But again, this comes under the umbrella of expected evidence. So in a very ironic way, I would argue that the US government and scientists of the world have a unique kinship with one another, which keeps humanity from evolving further. Because there's no question that if we could verify UFO reality, humanity would undoubtedly evolve further. Our understanding of the universe would progress. So in a very weird way, scientists of the world and the US government are the antithesis of progressiveness. The antithesis of progressiveness. They can deny it all they want. That's what I believe. I can't prove it. I don't believe it 100% because I haven't seen anything proving it beyond a shadow of any doubt. But the evidence is very compelling to me that this is the way it ultimately is. And I believe that I will end up being proven correct on this. Now, at least the US government, and I think other governments that have smoking gun proof of UFOs also are compelled for the same reasons not to broach this subject. It's just so far beyond human comprehension. They don't know what UFOs are exactly other than certainly technology stemming from another intelligence. They don't know what the agenda is of UFOs. UFOs are not operating in ways that we would expect. And on account of that, the governments don't want to go there because they can't answer any questions from their constituents. There's nothing they can say. There's very little they can say. And to add fuel to the fire, UFOs are attracted to nuclear energy, including installations with ICBMs. What government official would want to tell their constituents that, an unknown intelligence likes to surveil our nuclear missiles? No one wants to say that. Nobody. And so there's so many deep mysteries about UFOs, how they function, how they operate. And just the list of mysteries ascribed to UFOs is endless. Who are they? What are they doing here? What is their agenda? We don't have a clear picture of any of that. None of it. Because of the way UFOs function and operate. They're not revealing themselves. They're not giving us clear understandings. I would imagine people within government studying UFOs are perpetually scratching their heads because they don't operate and function within the confines of human understanding. They're well beyond human comprehension. And because of that, they don't fulfill any expectations that scientists would expect. That's why you hear people like Seth Shostak and Neil deGrasse Tyson, which, by the way, they may be what are considered celebrity scientists, but I don't think their opinions are isolated from the scientific community. I think there's a lot of people within the scientific community who would probably align with their viewpoints. Now, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them. Like, for example, Elon Musk. He's made a great argument. Why are there no relics? Surely if we were being visited by another intelligence, something would be left behind. Or they clean up after themselves so perfectly every time. So because expectations are not being met, thus scientists are not interested. Because the way they see it, expectations are not being met, therefore it doesn't exist. The way the government sees it, this is so beyond human comprehension, there's no way to, in any sort of practical, there's no sort of practical way to make this clear to the public. It's just too bizarre and we just don't want to go there. So in a very weird way, government and scientists are precluding progressivism. And I know that's going to be very controversial and people aren't going to like that I say that. But if what I'm saying is true, and maybe it's not, But if it is true, how could you argue against that? Doesn't mean that it's necessarily intentional. Do I think scientists want to slow down progress? Of course not. Do I think governments want to slow down progress? Well, that's a little bit more debatable. But it doesn't matter what their intentions are. Ultimately, because of the way UFOs are, they're both sort of on the same team, whether intentionally or with knowledge or not, to slow down progress in understanding our universe. Now, thankfully, there are people within the scientific community and government, because remember, it's government and the scientific community that are an impediment to progress, frankly. I don't know what else to say. You know, it's the government that's keeping it all squirreled away and classified, and it's the scientists who are just like, well, these things are not operating how we would expect, therefore they're not real. So we're not moving forward in better understanding our universe, because I think these things are real. So obviously, if they're real, we should be studying them, period. I don't care if they don't align with your expectations. We should be studying them, making every effort to better verify their existence and understand them, period. But thankfully, there are people within the scientific community doing just that, who I call disclosure warriors. Jacques Vallée, Gary Nolan. They are looking at metamaterials. I don't have the full breadth of what they're doing. I just know they're looking at metamaterials and trying to verify materials that have been recovered in which, through testing, do not appear to originate from human civilization. And that's ongoing. And that may, and it's going to be peer reviewed. And that may lead to some better understanding of UAP. They're sticking their neck out. They're putting time, energy, and funds into these efforts, and they should be commended for that. Kevin Knuth comes to mind as well. He's a part of UAP expeditions. Him and others intend to go out to where the Tic Tacs were first witnessed in 2004. Or they may have been witnessed before that, but they were certainly witnessed in 2004 with the USS Nimitz UFO event series. They're going out there off the coast of San Diego to see if they can collect any intelligence on these machines, radar, video, whatever. Because it's thought that these machines, for whatever reason, unknown reasons, seem to go to that vicinity of the Earth often. So even though so let's go into government. I castigate government, saying government is trying to stop progress. But not everybody in government. I look at Lou Elizondo. I look at Chris Mellon. I grant you they're not necessarily employed, although I do think they still consult for the government. They still have security clearances, but they're not actively employed by the U.S. government right now. True. But they are still tethered to the government. And so they are helping to push us forward in better understanding our universe. And I believe there are other people within the U.S. government who we don't know their names, who are on our side as well, who are on the side of Kevin Knuth and Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée and anyone else who wants to understand our universe better and perceives that UFOs are absolutely real and a true mystery. So what extent of the UFO literature stemming back 70 plus years do I actually subscribe to? Well, the best way for me to answer this is to give you a quote by Han Solo in the movie The Force Awakens, in which he was talking to Finn and Rey and said the following: "The crazy thing is, it's true. All of it. The Force, the Jedi, it's all true." Well, that's actually a little bit of an exaggeration, but I love that line in Star Wars, so I kind of had to include it. Here are my core beliefs, and I will try to rate them in terms of the extent that I believe them. Number one is that I believe UFOs are absolutely real and demonstrate technological capabilities well beyond anything any government on the planet is capable of. That's first and foremost. Number two, I believe that people are having contact. Some of it may be initiated, some of it may be uninitiated, and some of it may be downright problematic in terms of commandeering a person's sovereignty against their will. I do believe that's taking place as well. Now, is that physical? Are people being taken on ships? Or is that a psychotronic capability that is being harnessed by this intelligence, giving them the impression they're being taken on a ship? Or is it a combination of the two or something else? I don't have an answer to that question. But I do believe, based upon the immense amount of testimony and the patterns that have emerged and some of these people being credible in my book, I do believe it. So I believe that. And I also believe that the U.S. government has more than one UFO program. I don't believe that ATIP, now known as UAP Task Force, is the only tax dollar funded program within the United States government studying this phenomenon. I think there are probably many more, or at least a couple more, and much higher funded than ATIP ever was. Let me modify this list slightly and make number 2 that I strongly believe that there are programs, or at least one program within the United States government that has smoking gun proof that UFOs are real and not stemming from human intelligence. I'm not convinced, but I believe strongly that that is the case. So in the final analysis, I believe in some very bizarre way, governments and the scientific community have a kinship on why they're so reluctant to engage this topic in their own way. Governments don't want to engage it in terms of talking about it with the rest of the world because of how bizarre it is. And they just don't know how to deal with it. Beyond what I've already shared with you, that it's been demonstrated that UFOs are attracted to nuclear energy for unknown reasons, there have also been alleged, although I do believe it, school landings. The most famous one would be 1994, Rua, Zimbabwe, where scores of children witnessed craft and land and beings exit those craft, and some of those children, at least they say they received, telepathic messages from the beings. I mean, this is some really weird stuff. And I've already gone over unsolicited contact, some really weird stuff. So weird, in fact, and so beyond human comprehension, at the end of the day, the governments are like, nope, we are not even going there. Not today. Not today, we're not. They probably keep kicking the can down the field. And scientists, in a very similar vein, hear all this stuff about UFOs and are like, okay, where are the relics? Why are astronomers not seeing them? They're looking at the sky constantly. If people were actually being commandeered against their will, why would they not take like a lighter or a teacup or flash a picture with their iPhone? That never happened. So therefore, these stories of people being commandeered are also not happening. And look, I don't want to give the wrong impression. When I say that scientists are an impediment to progress, I'm only saying it because I feel like they haven't taken this subject seriously enough. And I feel like if they would have taken it more seriously, with their ingenuity, they would have figured out ways to have studied it. Even if it just meant, like right now, for example, they could ask the UAP task force, how are you studying this phenomenon? Because I know this is not an easy phenomenon to study using the scientific method, and I understand that. So they could ask the UAP task force, what are you doing to study this? And the UAP task force may not give them any information, but at least ask them. Just need to correct one thing. Astronomers have seen UFOs, but it's never been documented in a way that would be considered a smoking gun. Because if there was a smoking gun, well, then all of our institutions would buy into UFOs. So this is just how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong about it all. And if that's the case, great. Let's figure out what I got wrong, why I got it wrong, and let's move on. Right now, we're at an amazing historical time. In June, there's a 180-day report expected that's going to be given. There's going to be a classified annex for congressional committees, and then there's going to be a non-classified segment for everyone else. This 180-day report was a request by Congress to to get information from our various federal agencies on this phenomenon, which the Department of Defense has recently admitted it's real. And it's come to light that it wasn't true that the U.S. government stopped studying UFOs in 1969, that was false. So the way I see it is, this is either going to continue to escalate based upon UFOs being real, or sometime in the near future, it's just going to fizzle out. And we are really not going to make any more progress because there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. It's just a bunch of people within government who are not good at assessing reality. It's a bunch of people in the military and consisting of pilots, radar operators, and technicians that are not good at assessing reality. Because make no mistakes about it. Make no mistakes about it. If UFOs are nothing more than misidentifications, it means that everyone in high positions that have expressed there's something to this, it means that their judgment isn't very good. I'm not saying that in a mean-spirited way, it's just a fact. But when you have 4 aviators that say they saw a Tic Tac with no wings, no obvious form of propulsion, no exhaust, just a smooth Tic Tac. Initially, they saw it moving like this, close to the ocean, and then it saw David Fravor, and it tipped its nose up, and David Fravor circled it, and then he got within a half mile of it, and then it shot off at hypersonic velocity from a standstill, and the 4 aviators that witnessed it, 2 were up high and 2 were down low, so there's 2 separate angles. Now you have all these radar operators saying that they've confirmed this. Let me put it this way. They've confirmed that there have been anomalous flight patterns from unknown objects in the vicinity, including Dave Fravor, because remember, it was Chief Operator Kevin Day that directed a Top Gun pilot, David Fravor, to where the Tic Tac was. And once he reached merge plot, which means that him and the object were so close together that it became one blob on the radar screen, only then did the 4 aviators see the object. So there's a lot of mess up here if there's not something to this. And I'm not placing my money that there's not something to this. I think there's something to this. I think we're not alone. I'll see you in the next episode.